In this video, I want to take a look at what happened in these primaries for June 26, 2018, looking at how the Justice Democrats candidates did, as well as the Our Revolution candidates. So these are two of the more well-known progressive groups that have formed in recent years, basically in response to Donald Trump being elected as president. That was kind of how the Justice Democrats got their roots in trying to mount some kind of opposition to the establishment Democrats and run more progressive candidates to challenge the Republicans. And then, of course, you had Our Revolution, who was kind of birthed out of the Bernie Sanders movement when he ran in the Democratic primary in 2016. So two progressive groups that are still very young, especially relative to a lot of the candidates and groups that they're running against, but still showing that they can be successful and win certain districts and races if it's the right scenario for them to do so and if it's the right kind of candidate. And just because some of these candidates lost doesn't mean that the candidate that beat them is a corporatist or a moderate in all of these scenarios. It just might be somebody that either has different progressive groups backing them or that type of scenario. But more often than not, in these races where these more progressive candidates are losing, it's where the establishment puts their finger on the scale more so for the candidate that does go on and win at the end of the day. But we have a number of different races to talk about here, and I apologize if I pronounce some of these names incorrectly. But starting off here in the state of Colorado, the 1st Congressional District, you had a Justice Democrat, Saira Rao, who didn't fare so well, about 30% of the vote, in what was a pretty big turnout there, over 105,000 votes cast in the Democratic primary. Only still 88% of the vote count. I'm not sure why it's not a bit higher than that at this point, but still nonetheless the Justice Democrat going on to lose the Colorado 1st District. And there are a number of these races where the progressive candidate comes up short, but there are some monumental wins that progressives were able to pick up last night that were pretty earth-shattering and impressive. So we'll get to those as well. But going through our list here, the Colorado 5th District, and we have Stephany Spaulding, who ran unopposed, so she was a Justice Democrat. She'll be running in this race in Colorado 5th District, challenging the incumbent on the Republican side. So I guess you could say that that's a win. I think Spaulding maybe had some challengers that bowed out of this race before it got to the primary, so maybe she would have won even if she did have some kind of opposition, but that is a Justice Democrat going on and taking that primary unopposed. And then moving on to the Our Revolution candidate, Levi Tillemann, who had the full weight of the establishment on his challenger's side, Jason Crow, and he had a tough time mounting and closing in on this race, losing by about 24,000 votes, getting just about a third of the vote there for the Our Revolution candidate. So now we're going to move over to Maryland, and this was a massive win for progressives. You had obviously the full weight of the progressive movement behind Ben Jealous, who was a big-time supporter of Bernie Sanders back in the 2016 Democratic primary. Our Revolution was behind Ben Jealous. Justice Democrats was behind Ben Jealous, and he went on to do quite well, winning by over 10 percentage points against his main challenger, Rushern Baker, who was having the support of the establishment Democrats. So this was a big-time win for the progressives, and now they're going to go ahead and try to beat the incumbent Republican, Larry Hogan, who's pretty popular as the governor in the state of Maryland. And out of all of the primary races that happened yesterday and now going into the general election, this is one of the races that I'm most interested to see how it turns out, as Ben Jealous, as a strong progressive, takes on a Republican incumbent for the governorship. So now moving on to the Maryland 6th Congressional District. And in the 6th Congressional District, we had Roger Mano, and let's see where we are here. And it looks like he didn't do so hot, finishing 4th in this race, getting a little under 6,000 votes. So not a great showing there for Roger Mano, who did have the support of both the Justice Democrats and Our Revolution behind him. So that's a pretty disappointing result there in Maryland's 6th District. And again, guys, I just want to note that just because a Justice Democrat or an Our Revolution candidate loses doesn't mean that the person who won is definitely a corporatist or a centrist. It just means that they went on and got enough votes to go on to win. But in general, you would think it's the person that has the most money in the race, which would mean that they're probably more of an establishment candidate. But still, nonetheless, it's not necessarily always the case. So that is something to keep in mind. But moving on here to the Maryland 8th District. And Jamie Raskin extremely impressive win there. That was an Our Revolution candidate, getting over 90% of the vote. And of course, being an incumbent, you would expect them to do quite well, over 97% of the vote in there. So the Our Revolution candidate, being the incumbent, goes on to win by a very significant margin. This is going to be a candidate that you basically can lock in as going on in winning this district and going to be in Congress yet again as the incumbent. And just another interesting note for Maryland, this isn't a Justice Democrat or Our Revolution, but it's a candidate that was supported by Wolfpack, because this particular state senator in Maryland was the one that kind of put the axe in getting the money out of politics and having that go through Maryland. So Wolfpack went in and supported her opponent, and it's actually pretty interesting to see how this one is shaped up. So going over here, Antonio Hayes was the Wolfpack-backed candidate, absolutely crushing Barbara Robinson. You don't see the voting numbers here, but he had well over 60% of the vote. And the incumbent Barbara Robinson, who was basically the decider in not getting the money out of politics resolution to go through in Maryland, paying the price here as the people that want to get money out of politics, kind of interestingly enough, going ahead and putting their finger on the scale here for Antonio Hayes as he went on to pick up this win over the incumbent. So now we're going to move on to the state of New York that had quite a number of candidates that we're going to be talking about. So starting off here in the New York 2nd District, we had an Our Revolution candidate. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the name. It's Luba Shirley, and they went on to win with almost 60% of the vote. So that's another Our Revolution candidate that went on to win their primary. Moving on to the 11th District, and Michael DeVito coming up short here, getting in second place with 19% of the votes, and that was a Justice Democrat candidate. And now we have the earth-shattering result that made all the progressives very happy yesterday, and that was in the New York's 14th District as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, with over 57% of the vote, going on to beat incumbent establishment Democrat Joe Crowley. And Joe Crowley, he's a guy that takes a lot of corporate money. He's one of the biggest raisers of money in the House of Representatives for the Democrats, which is why he's in a position of leadership. But this was the perfect kind of candidate to run against him. She didn't take any corporate money, and the overwhelming majority of Ocasio-Cortez's donations came from small donors in comparison to Crowley, who basically none of his donations come from small donors. And Ocasio-Cortez was outspent 10-1, but had a grassroots campaign, knocking on a ton of doors, getting the vote out. And with all of that hard work, she was able to go on and win this primary in kind of stunning fashion, taking down Joe Crowley, who many felt like he would challenge Nancy Pelosi to become the next leader of the House of Representatives for the Democrats. Not going to be happening now. He's going to be shown the exit as his progressive challenger, 28-year-old Ocasio-Cortez, who's never run for political office before this, going on and inspiring a lot of people as she went on to win this race. And she was a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate. So we just have 4 more candidates to go through in this list. Actually 5 now that I'm looking at it here. There was a special note for Dylan Ratigan. He wasn't a Justice Democrat or an Our Revolution candidate, but I still wanted to touch on his race. Going down here to the 19th District in New York, we have Jeff Beals, the Justice Democrat, and he did not fare too well, but it was a highly competitive race here between a number of candidates. Beals, the Justice Democrat, coming up short here at 4,608 votes to Antonio Delgado. Moving on to the 21st District, and we have Dylan Ratigan here. He wasn't a Justice Democrat or Our Revolution, but he is a guy that has very deep ties to progressives. Coming up well short here, getting second place against the establishment candidate here who kind of ran away with things. And also in this district, Patrick Nelson was a Justice Democrat, and it doesn't look like he fared all that well either, getting, it looks like, 5th place in this scenario. And we just have a couple more candidates here. The New York 23rd District, Ian Golden, and again, finishing well back here in 4th place. I believe he was a Justice Democrat in this scenario, so also not showing too well in that one. And then New York's 24th. This was an Our Revolution candidate, Dana Balter. But nonetheless, getting almost 14,000 votes, almost 63% of the vote there. So the Our Revolution candidate going on and winning that primary. And it'll be interesting to see how that race shakes out as well. So that's going to wrap up this video, guys. I touched on all of the Justice Democrat and Our Revolution candidates and how they fared in their respective races. A number of them coming up short, but the big ones being Ben Jealous, who was supported by both the Justice Democrats and Our Revolution, as well as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also supported by those two groups, going on and winning impressive fashion in those races. So thanks, guys, for stopping on in. Subscribe for more. Check out all of our videos over on our YouTube channel. We do analysis and prediction videos and going over results of these elections. So thanks for stopping on in. We hope to see you back here for future videos. Bye.